Love rarely announces itself with clarity. More often, it leaks through behavior before it ever reaches language. What a person does unconsciously tells the truth long before what they are willing to say consciously. This is because love does not originate in logic or intention. It begins in deeper layers of the psyche where instincts, emotional memory, and unresolved attachment patterns live. By the time the mind starts labeling feelings, the body and behavior have already taken sides. Unconscious behavior is honest because it is unedited. It bypasses the carefully constructed self-image a person tries to maintain. Someone may believe they are detached, independent, or emotionally unavailable, yet their actions quietly contradict this belief. They remember small details without trying. They react emotionally to things they claim do not matter. They adjust their schedule, tone, or priorities without realizing they are doing so. These are not strategies, they are signals. When love is shallow, behavior remains controlled. A person chooses when to engage and when to withdraw. They calculate responses. They protect their autonomy. But when love sinks below awareness, control weakens. The psyche begins to orient itself around another person as a point of emotional gravity. This is when unconscious behavior starts revealing what the conscious mind has not yet accepted. One of the clearest signs is emotional responsiveness. He reacts to your mood shifts before understanding why. Your silence creates restlessness. Your distance produces anxiety he cannot explain. He may tell himself he is simply irritated or distracted, but his nervous system knows otherwise. Love, at this level, is experienced as a disruption before it is experienced as desire. Another sign appears in protective instincts. Without deciding to, he shields your emotional space. He becomes alert to threats, subtle or imagined. He feels compelled to explain himself when he normally would not. Protection is not always loud or heroic. Often it shows up as concern, defensiveness, or an urge to maintain connection even during conflict. These impulses are not chosen, they arise automatically when attachment has formed. Unconscious love also reveals itself through contradiction. He behaves in ways that conflict with his stated values or intentions. He might say he wants distance, yet he stays emotionally engaged. He might claim he is unsure, yet his actions remain consistent. This inner split creates tension because part of him is already bonded while another part is still resisting. Behavior exposes the bonded part. Even avoidance can be a sign. When feelings grow stronger than a person feels equipped to handle, the psyche may attempt retreat. Distance, withdrawal, or emotional confusion are not always signs of lack of care. Sometimes they are signs of care that feels overwhelming. The unconscious does not distinguish between love and threat. Both activate intensity. What matters is that the behavior still revolves around you. The most revealing unconscious behaviors appear under pressure. When he senses the possibility of losing you, his actions shift. He listens differently. He softens. He reaches out in ways that surprise even him. Fear of loss activates what attachment has already established. This is not manipulation. It is exposure. Love that lives below awareness cannot be hidden for long because it shapes reactions, priorities, and emotional rhythms. The body aligns before the mind understands. Behavior adjusts before language forms. Attention narrows without permission. The psyche reorganizes itself quietly, invisibly, and persistently around the person who has entered its inner world. Emotional investment rarely feels calm at first. Before it brings clarity or security, it produces tension. This tension appears as inner conflict because the psyche is being pulled in two opposing directions at once. One part wants connection, closeness, and emotional truth. Another part wants safety, control, and self-protection. When someone is not deeply invested, these parts do not collide. But when attachment forms, they clash. Inner conflict is not a sign of uncertainty about you. It is a sign of certainty about the impact you have. Or emotional investment threatens the structures a person has built to stay emotionally contained. It challenges self-images such as independence, emotional restraint, or invulnerability. The more someone has relied on these structures, the more disruptive love becomes. This is why emotionally invested people often appear inconsistent. One moment they are warm, attentive, and open. The next, distant, guarded, or withdrawn. This fluctuation does not mean their feelings are changing. It means different internal forces are taking turns in control. When the desire for connection rises, they move closer. When fear of loss or exposure activates, they retreat. The conflict intensifies when past emotional wounds are involved. Love does not arrive in an empty space. It enters a psyche shaped by previous attachments, betrayals, and unmet needs. Emotional investment reactivates unresolved experiences, forcing them back into awareness. The person is not only responding to you, but also to memories and fears that predate the connection. This overlap creates confusion because the emotional response feels larger than the present moment. Another expression of inner conflict is overthinking. When someone is emotionally invested but not fully conscious of it, the mind attempts to regain control. It analyzes conversations, replays interactions, and searches for meaning in small details. This mental activity is not casual curiosity. It is the ego trying to manage feelings that are emerging without permission. The heart has already committed. The mind is scrambling to catch up. Inner conflict also shows up in hesitation. He wants to act, but delays. He wants to speak, but holds back. He feels drawn to you, yet resists making decisive moves. This hesitation is not lack of desire. It is the friction between longing and fear. Acting would require admitting the depth of his investment, and that admission feels risky. The stronger the emotional investment, the more intense the conflict becomes. Indifference does not produce tension. Only care does. Only attachment creates stakes. The inner struggle is proportional to how much he stands to lose. This is why calm detachment often signals low investment, while emotional turbulence signals the opposite. At times, the conflict may surface as irritation or defensiveness. When feelings grow too close to awareness, they seek an outlet. Frustration becomes safer than vulnerability. Anger feels more controllable than longing. These reactions are not directed at you as a person, but at the emotional exposure you represent. What is important to understand is that inner conflict is transitional. It exists in the space between unconscious attachment and conscious acceptance. The psyche is reorganizing itself around a new emotional reality. Old defenses are being questioned. New priorities are forming. Until this process settles, behavior may feel contradictory. Emotional investment does not announce itself with certainty or confidence. It reveals itself through struggle, through hesitation, through tension, through the quiet war between wanting closeness and fearing what closeness demands. When someone is emotionally invested, peace is not the first feeling that appears. Conflict is. Protection rarely begins as a decision. It emerges as an impulse, an instinctive response that activates before conscious thought. When someone feels the urge to protect you emotionally or psychologically, it is not rooted in obligation or politeness. It is rooted in attachment. The psyche does not protect what it does not value. Protection is one of the earliest and most reliable expressions of emotional bonding, even when the person experiencing it does not yet recognize the bond. This instinct often appears subtly. He becomes aware of your emotional shifts. He notices when something feels off, even if you have said nothing. He adjusts his tone, his timing, or his behavior to prevent harm or discomfort. These adjustments are not calculated. They are automatic, arising from an internal sense that your emotional state matters to his own equilibrium. Protection also shows itself in boundaries. When someone is attached, they instinctively defend the emotional space around you. This might appear as discomfort when others disrespect you, curiosity about who influences you, or a desire to shield you from situations that feel destabilizing. These reactions are not about control. They are about preservation. Attachment creates a sense of responsibility that exists before agreements or labels. Another form of protection is emotional containment. He moderates his words to avoid hurting you. He withholds harsh truths, not out of dishonesty, but out of care. He chooses gentleness where he might otherwise choose bluntness. This is not weakness. It is an unconscious recognition that your emotional well-being is now intertwined with his own. Causing you pain would disturb his internal balance. Protection becomes especially visible under perceived threat. The threat does not need to be dramatic. It can be emotional distance, misunderstanding, or the presence of potential loss. When this occurs, behavior shifts, attention sharpens, effort increases. There is a subtle urgency to restore safety, connection, or clarity. This response is driven by attachment, not strategy. Even jealousy can be a distorted form of protection. At its core, jealousy is not about possession, but about fear of displacement. It signals that the psyche has already assigned value and priority. While unhealthy expressions of jealousy can be damaging, the underlying emotion reveals that attachment has taken root. The fear is not of competition, but of emotional exclusion. Protection also manifests as consistency. He shows up when it would be easier not to. He maintains contact during difficult moments. He does not disappear when things become uncomfortable. Consistency is protective because it provides emotional stability. When someone is attached, they intuitively understand that absence can be a form of harm. What makes protection a clear sign of attachment is that it often contradicts self-interest. Protecting someone requires emotional exposure, effort, and vulnerability. A person who is not attached will prioritize convenience and self-preservation. A person who is attached will accept discomfort to preserve connection. This trade-off happens unconsciously, long before it is justified rationally. Protection does not always look gentle. Sometimes it appears as concern disguised as firmness, or distance meant to prevent greater harm. These expressions can be confusing because they do not resemble traditional affection, yet they still originate from the same source emotional investment that has crossed into attachment. Attachment reorganizes priorities. Another person's emotional state begins to influence internal stability. Protection emerges naturally from this shift because the psyche seeks to preserve what has become integrated into its sense of balance. You are no longer external. You are part of the internal landscape. This is why protection is such a powerful indicator of attachment. Words can be chosen. Promises can be performed. Protection cannot be faked for long. It arises reflexively, revealing where emotional allegiance already exists, even when the conscious mind has not yet acknowledged it. Fear of loss does not create attachment, it reveals it. When the possibility of losing someone appears, layers of the psyche that normally remain dormant begin to stir. These layers hold emotional capacities, vulnerabilities, and instincts that do not activate in the presence of indifference. Only when something truly matters does the mind descend into its deeper structures. Fear of loss is the signal that something of value has already been integrated into the inner world. This fear often arises before conscious awareness. A subtle shift occurs when distance is sensed, when silence lingers, or when the connection feels threatened. The body reacts first. Restlessness, distraction, and emotional unease appear without a clear explanation. The mind searches for reasons, but the source lies deeper. The psyche has detected potential separation from something it now depends on emotionally. Hidden depths emerge because fear of loss bypasses surface identity. A person may see themselves as composed, detached, or emotionally controlled, yet under threat of loss, those traits weaken. Care breaks through restraint. Urgency replaces indifference. Emotional honesty surfaces where avoidance once existed. These changes are not strategic. They are revelations. One of the most noticeable shifts is increased emotional presence. He listens more intently. He becomes more responsive. He notices nuances he previously ignored. Fear of loss sharpens perception because the psyche is attempting to preserve connection. Attention becomes focused not by choice, but by instinct. What once felt optional now feels essential. Fear of loss also awakens courage. People often believe courage comes from confidence, but in emotional life, courage often comes from fear. The fear of losing someone can push a person to speak truths they have been avoiding, to express care they have been suppressing, or to act in ways that contradict their self-protective habits. These actions feel risky, but the risk of silence feels greater. At the same time, fear of loss exposes vulnerability, defensive walls weaken, emotional armor cracks. The person becomes more transparent, even if unintentionally. Their reactions become more emotionally charged, their behavior less filtered. What emerges is not weakness, but authenticity that had been hidden beneath control. This fear can also awaken old wounds. Loss does not only threaten the present, it echoes the past. Unresolved separations, abandonment experiences, and unmet attachment needs resurface. The current connection becomes linked to earlier emotional memories, intensifying the response. This is why reactions to potential loss can feel disproportionate. The psyche is responding to more than one timeline at once. Hidden depths are also revealed through effort. When fear of loss appears, effort increases without negotiation. Time is made, energy is redirected, priorities shift. The person does not weigh whether the effort is worth it. The decision has already been made internally. Effort flows toward what the psyche is trying to preserve. Importantly, fear of loss does not always express itself gracefully. It can manifest as confusion, emotional intensity, or even temporary withdrawal. These reactions can seem contradictory, but they originate from the same source. The psyche is struggling to integrate attachment with self-protection. Both forces activate simultaneously, creating complex behavior. What fear of loss ultimately reveals is depth of investment. Indifference does not fear loss, only attachment does. Only when someone has become emotionally significant does their absence threaten internal stability. Fear is the alarm system of attachment, signaling that something essential is at risk. Through fear of loss, the psyche exposes how deeply another person has been woven into its inner structure. What was hidden becomes visible. What was unacknowledged becomes undeniable. In this way, fear does not weaken love. It illuminates it. Love does not begin as a clear realization. It begins as a quiet shift in orientation, a subtle reorganization of attention, and an emotional energy that happens long before the mind gives it a name. Awareness lags behind experience because love does not originate in conscious thought. It rises from deeper psychological layers where instinct, memory, and emotional patterning reside. By the time awareness arrives, love has often already been shaping behavior, perception, and priorities. This is why people are frequently surprised by their own feelings. They look back and realize they were already invested before they ever admitted it to themselves. They cared before they chose to care. They missed someone before they understood why absence mattered. These realizations feel sudden, but they are not. They are delayed recognitions of something that has been developing quietly. Before awareness, love expresses itself through attention. A person notices details they normally would overlook. Their thoughts return to you without effort. They feel drawn to your presence and unsettled by your absence, even if they rationalize these reactions as coincidence or habit. Attention is the psyche's way of signaling importance before the ego assigns meaning. Love also arrives before awareness through emotional attunement. He senses your moods, reacts to subtle changes in your tone, and feels affected by your emotional state without consciously deciding to engage. This attunement happens automatically because the emotional system has already marked you as significant. Awareness follows later, often lagging behind the emotional reality. Another early sign is behavioral alignment. Without realizing it, he adjusts his routines, preferences, or decisions in ways that accommodate you. He may justify these changes logically, but the motivation is emotional. The psyche has begun to integrate you into its internal structure, and behavior adapts accordingly. These adjustments feel natural rather than intentional, which is why they often go unnoticed at first. Resistance is also a sign that love has arrived before awareness. When feelings emerge that threaten self, image, or emotional safety, the conscious mind may push back. He may tell himself he is not ready, that the timing is wrong, or that the connection is not significant. Yet the more he resists, the more the underlying attachment reveals itself through emotion and behavior. Resistance is not absence of feeling. It is evidence of feeling that has not yet been accepted. Love before awareness often creates confusion. Emotions appear without a clear source. Longing exists without explanation. The person feels pulled toward you, while simultaneously questioning why. This confusion arises because the emotional system has moved ahead of the cognitive system. The heart has crossed a threshold the mind has not yet processed. This is also why love can feel inevitable in hindsight. Once awareness catches up, people often say they should have known earlier. But awareness operates on language and concepts, while love operates on experience. You cannot recognize what you do not yet have words for. The psyche moves first, understanding follows. Importantly, love arriving before awareness does not mean it is weak or temporary. On the contrary, it often indicates depth. Feelings that form beneath awareness are less influenced by fantasy or intention. They are responses to genuine emotional resonance. They develop organically, without pressure or performance. As awareness begins to emerge, it often brings both clarity and fear. Clarity, because the feelings finally make sense. Fear, because acknowledging love introduces vulnerability and the possibility of loss. This is the moment when inner conflict intensifies, as the person must reconcile what they feel with what they believe they can handle. Love does not ask permission from awareness. It establishes itself quietly, persistently, and deeply, shaping emotional reality before conscious recognition has a chance to intervene. By the time the mind notices, love has already taken root, already influenced choices, already altered the internal landscape, already begun its work of transformation